The boardroom fell silent. Aurora Vale, the most feared billionaire in New York media, stared down the man who'd just done what no one dared: call her a coward. Daniel Brooks stood there, hands steady, knowing he'd just torched his career to ashes. But his daughter's voice echoed in his head. "Daddy, are you brave?" And for the first time in 7 years of playing it safe, he was. What happens when a single father with nothing left to lose challenges the woman who has everything? When perfection meets defiance, when power collides with principle, something has to shatter. Will it be his livelihood or her carefully constructed walls? Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this journey travels. The alarm clock screamed at 5:30, same as every morning. Daniel Brooks slapped it quiet and swung his legs off the mattress, feet hitting the cold hardwood floor of his cramped Brooklyn apartment. Through the thin wall, he could hear Mrs. Chen's television already blaring, some morning show host laughing too loud about nothing important. He shuffled to the bathroom, avoiding his reflection. 32 years old, and he looked 40 on bad days. The mirror didn't lie. Dark circles under gray eyes. Stubble he'd shave in the shower. Hair that needed cutting 2 weeks ago. He turned on the water, waiting for it to heat, and caught himself doing the math again. Rent due in 6 days. Electricity bill overdue by 3. Mia's school supplies needed replenishing. The numbers never added up right, no matter how many times he rearranged them. The shower helped. Hot water had a way of resetting things, at least temporarily. He dressed in the near-dark, white button-down, navy slacks, the gray tie Mia had picked out last Christmas because it looked like storm clouds. She had a thing for weather lately, always pointing at the sky, announcing cumulus or cirrus like other kids called out ice cream flavors. He patted down the hallway to her room, easing the door open. Mia lay sprawled across her twin bed, one arm dangling off the edge, her stuffed elephant clutched against her chest. 7 years old, and she still slept like she was trying to take up as much space as possible, as if the world might forget she existed if she made herself too small. Daniel crouched beside the bed, brushing dark hair off her forehead. "Hey, Meteor, time to wake up." She groaned, burrowing deeper into the pillow. "Come on, you've got that presentation today, remember? The solar system project?" One brown eye cracked open. "Is Jupiter still the biggest?" "Last I checked." "Then I'm ready." She sat up, rubbing her face. "Is there cereal?" "There's always cereal." "The good kind or the cardboard kind?" "The kind that's in the cabinet." She wrinkled her nose but didn't argue. That was Mia, adaptable, resilient, better at rolling with life's punches than any 7-year-old should have to be. Daniel stood, knees creaking, and headed to the kitchen to start coffee. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that doubled as a dining room, and a living room barely big enough for a couch and television. But it was theirs. After the divorce, after Jenny had decided motherhood wasn't what she'd signed up for, and vanished to Portland with some yoga instructor named River, Daniel had fought for custody and won by default. Jenny hadn't contested, hadn't even shown up to court. 3 years later, Mia rarely asked about her mother anymore. Daniel didn't know if that was healthy or heartbreaking. Probably both. He poured coffee into a chipped mug, his favorite, the one Mia had decorated with finger paints that said "Best Dad" in crooked letters, and started assembling breakfast. Cereal, milk, a banana he cut into coins because Mia refused to eat it whole. Toast with peanut butter, no jelly. Orange juice in the plastic cup with the cartoon sharks. Mia appeared in the doorway, wearing mismatched socks and her school uniform inside out. "Shirt," Daniel said. She looked down. "Oh." She yanked it off, flipped it, pulled it back on. "Better?" Perfect. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that came from years of just the two of them against the world. Daniel scrolled through work emails on his phone, deleting most, flagging a few. The usual chaos, project updates, meeting reminders, passive-aggressive messages from Todd in accounting about expense reports. Then he saw it. An email from Rebecca Singh, the chief strategy officer. Subject line: executive assignment, immediate. His stomach dropped. Daniel opened it, scanning quickly. Words jumped out. High priority initiative. Direct report to Ms. Vale. Presentation required by Friday. Aurora Vale. The name alone made people at Meridian Media tense up. He'd seen her exactly 3 times in his 4 years with the company, twice in all staff meetings where she'd spoken for exactly 12 minutes before disappearing, and once in an elevator where she'd stood in perfect silence, radiating the kind of cold efficiency that made small talk feel like a punishable offense. She was 30 years old, a self-made billionaire who'd built Meridian from a scrappy digital startup into a media empire that rivaled legacy giants. Forbes called her a visionary. The Wall Street Journal called her ruthless. Employees called her terrifying. And apparently Daniel had just been assigned to work directly under her. "Daddy, you're making a face." He looked up. Mia was studying him with those sharp brown eyes, the ones that saw too much. "Just work stuff," he said. "Bad work stuff? Complicated work stuff. Is someone being mean to you?" He smiled despite himself. "No, Bug. It's actually kind of a good thing. A big opportunity." "So why the face?" "Because big opportunities came with big risks, and he couldn't afford to lose this job. Because Aurora Vale's projects didn't tolerate mediocrity, and Daniel was spectacularly, solidly, relentlessly average. Because he had a daughter to raise and bills to pay, and absolutely no safety net if this went sideways. "Just surprised, that's all," he said. "Come on, finish up. Bus comes in 20. The morning routine clicked along, teeth brushed, backpack packed, shoes located after a brief search under the couch. Daniel walked Mia downstairs to the lobby, where the school bus idled at the curb, exhaust puffing white in the October cold. "Remember," Mia said, adjusting her backpack straps. "Jupiter is the biggest, Saturn has the coolest rings, and Pluto is still a planet in my heart. Got it. You'll be great." She grinned, gap-toothed and fearless, and climbed aboard. Daniel watched the bus pull away, feeling that familiar ache in his chest, the one that showed up every time she left, the one that whispered he wasn't doing enough, wasn't good enough, wasn't enough, period. He shook it off and headed for the subway. The morning commute was packed, as always. Daniel wedged himself between a woman reading a thriller novel and a teenager with headphones leaking tinny hip-hop. The train lurched forward, swaying through dark tunnels toward Manhattan. He pulled out his phone, rereading Rebecca's email. The project was a campaign rebrand for Meridian's flagship news division, a massive undertaking that required coordination across multiple departments, budget approval in the high 8 figures, and a strategy that would appeal to both legacy audiences and younger demographics. The kind of project that could make a career, or end one. Daniel had built his reputation on solid, dependable work. He wasn't flashy. He didn't chase innovation for its own sake. He analyzed data, identified patterns, crafted strategies that minimized risk and maximized steady growth. Middle of the road. Safe. Aurora Vale did not hire people for safe. The train pulled into his stop. Daniel climbed the stairs to street level, emerging into the glass and steel canyon of Midtown. Meridian Media's headquarters towered 43 stories above 6th Avenue, all sleek black glass and sharp angles, the kind of building designed to intimidate. He swiped his badge at the lobby turnstile and rode the elevator to the 14th floor, where the strategy department occupied half the space in an open concept layout that pretended to foster collaboration but mostly just eliminated privacy. His desk sat in the middle row, unremarkable except for the framed photo of Mia holding up her kindergarten graduation certificate. Daniel dropped his bag, logged into his computer, and immediately got ambushed by Cynthia from 2 desks over. "You saw the email," she said. Not a question. "Yeah. You know what this means, right? That I'm going to be very busy? That you're either about to get promoted or fired. There's no middle ground with Vale projects." Daniel pulled up his calendar. A meeting had appeared at 10 a.m., conference room A. Attendees, Rebecca Singh, Aurora Vale, Daniel Brooks. 2 hours. "I need coffee," he muttered. "You need a miracle," Cynthia said, not unkindly. "But coffee's a start." He grabbed his mug, not the one from home, the plain white one he kept at the office, and headed for the break room. The coffee was terrible, burnt and weak, but it was caffeinated and free. He poured a cup, added 2 sugars, and leaned against the counter, trying to steady his breathing. "Nervous?" Daniel turned. Marcus Chen, one of the senior strategists, stood in the doorway holding a protein shake. "Should I be?" "Depends. You good at walking tightropes?" "Never tried." "Well, you're about to." Marcus took a sip of his shake, grimacing. I worked a veil project last year. Lasted 3 weeks before she reassigned me. Not fired, just removed. Like a broken part. What happened? I suggested we stick with the existing brand voice. She said I was prioritizing comfort over growth. She wasn't wrong, but she also wasn't interested in hearing why I thought slow and steady might work. So what's the secret? How do you survive? Wow. Marcus considered. Don't bullshit her. Don't hedge. Don't try to tell her what you think she wants to hear. She'll gut you for it. If you've got an idea, own it. If you don't know something, say so. And whatever you do, don't waste her time. That's it? That's everything. Marcus tossed his empty bottle in the recycling. Good luck, man. You're going to need it. The next 90 minutes crawled. Daniel tried to focus on other work, finishing a competitive analysis for a client pitch, reviewing budget projections for Q4, but his brain kept circling back to the 10 o'clock meeting. He pulled up everything he could find on Aurora Vale, reading articles, watching interviews, studying the way she spoke, the questions she asked, the pattern of her thinking. She was precise. No filler words, no rambling. Every sentence carried weight. She didn't smile much, at least not in public. Her hair was always pulled back severe and sleek, dark as ink. She wore suits that cost more than Daniel's monthly rent, tailored to perfection. She looked at people the way a surgeon looked at a patient, assessing, calculating, determining exactly where to cut. At 9:55, Daniel grabbed a notebook and pen and headed for conference room A. Rebecca Singh was already there, setting up a presentation on the wall-mounted screen. She was in her mid-40s, sharp and efficient, with the kind of competence that made her invaluable and the kind of stress lines that showed the cost. Daniel, she said. Good. Sit. He sat. Ms. Vale will be here in a moment. This meeting is primarily introductory. She'll outline the project scope, expectations, timeline. Your job is to listen, ask intelligent questions, and demonstrate you understand the stakes. Understood. This is not a participation trophy situation. She picked you because your work on the Davidson campaign showed strategic depth without unnecessary flash. She values substance. Don't try to impress her, just be competent. The door opened. Aurora Vale walked in, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 5 degrees. She was smaller than Daniel expected, maybe 5'6" in heels, but she carried herself like someone much larger. Her suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored. Her hair was pulled back in a low bun, not a strand out of place. Her eyes were dark, almost black, and when they landed on Daniel, he felt like he was being inventoried. Ms. Vale, Rebecca said, standing. This is Daniel Brooks, the strategist I recommended for. I know who he is. Aurora's voice was cool, clipped. Sit down, Rebecca. We're not doing theater. Rebecca sat. Aurora remained standing, arms crossed, studying Daniel like he was a particularly disappointing quarterly report. Tell me, she said. Why do you think you're here? Daniel's mouth went dry. Because you need someone to lead the news division rebrand campaign. Wrong. I need someone to save it. The rebrand was assigned to Mitchell Gao 6 months ago. He's produced 3 iterations of strategic framework, each one more derivative than the last. I fired him yesterday. She paused. Do you know why? Because the work wasn't good enough. Because the work was safe. Because he kept trying to minimize risk instead of maximizing impact. Because he treated this like a branding exercise instead of a fundamental reimagining of how we connect with audiences. She uncrossed her arms, placing her hands flat on the table. This company is worth $4.2 billion. Our news division is hemorrhaging credibility and viewership. If we don't fix it, we lose market position, advertising revenue, and cultural relevance. I'm not interested in incremental improvement. I'm interested in transformation. Daniel nodded, unsure if he was supposed to respond. Rebecca tells me you have a daughter, Aurora continued. The shift threw him. Yes, Mia. She's 7. Single parent? Yes. So you understand stakes. You understand that failure isn't academic. It has consequences. Every day. Something flickered in her expression. Not warmth exactly, but acknowledgement. Good. Then you'll understand when I say this. I'm giving you 6 weeks. You'll report directly to me. Weekly presentations, daily updates, if necessary. I want a strategy that doesn't just refresh our brand. I want one that redefines how people think about news media. I want emotional resonance, not just demographic targeting. I want stories that matter, not just content that performs. Daniel's heart was hammering. That's ambitious. Ambitious is the baseline. I'm asking for exceptional. She pulled out a chair, finally sitting. You have 48 hours to present your initial approach. Not a full strategy, just the foundational thinking. How you plan to tackle this. What makes your approach different? 48 hours. Is that a problem? Yes, absolutely. No, that's... Aurora's gaze held his for a long moment. Then she stood. Rebecca will send you the background files. Read everything. And Daniel? Yes? Don't try to give me what you think I want. Give me what you actually believe will work. I can smell bullshit from 3 floors away, and I don't have patience for it. She walked out, the door clicking shut behind her with a finality that felt like a warning. Rebecca exhaled slowly. Well, that went better than expected. That was better? What? She didn't ask you to explain your entire career philosophy or grill you on industry trends. Trust me, that was gentle. Daniel slumped in his chair, adrenaline draining. 48 hours. You'll want to cancel everything else on your calendar. Rebecca started packing up her laptop. And Daniel? She meant what she said. Don't pander. She's testing whether you have a backbone. The rest of the day blurred. Daniel returned to his desk, opened the files Rebecca sent, and promptly felt like he was drowning. Market research reports, focus group transcripts, competitor analyses, internal memos documenting the news division's declining performance. Hundreds of pages of data, all pointing to the same conclusion. Meridian's news operation was dying a slow, public death. Audiences didn't trust it. Younger demographics didn't watch it. Advertisers were pulling back. The brand had become synonymous with corporate media, a death sentence in an era where authenticity was currency. Daniel read until his eyes burned. He took notes, sketched frameworks, discarded ideas as fast as he generated them. Every approach felt either too safe or too reckless, too derivative or too disconnected from reality. By 6 o'clock, his brain was mush. He packed up, rode the subway home, and climbed the stairs to his apartment where Mrs. Chen was watching Mia, same as every weekday. She had carrots with dinner, Mrs. Chen reported, pulling on her coat. Most of them. Thanks, Mrs. Chen. I'll pay you Friday. You always do, Daniel. Don't work too hard. Mia was sprawled on the living room floor, coloring. She looked up when he came in. How was complicated work stuff? Still complicated. How was the presentation? I got an A. Mr. Patterson said my facts were impressively accurate. She said it in a deep voice, imitating her teacher. Also, Marcus threw up during his turn, so that helped. Daniel laughed despite the exhaustion. Well done, both the A and the strategic timing. They made dinner together. Spaghetti with jarred sauce, garlic bread from the freezer. Simple, fast, enough. Mia talked nonstop about school, about her friend Emma, who was learning violin, about the field trip next month to the Science Museum. Daniel listened, half present, part of his brain still churning through strategy frameworks. Daddy, you're doing the face again. He blinked. Sorry, Bug. Just thinking about work. Is it the good opportunity or the bad opportunity? Still figuring that out. After dinner, they did homework. Math problems Mia blazed through, a reading assignment Daniel helped her sound out. Then bath, pajamas, teeth, and the bedtime routine they'd perfected over 3 years. Daniel sat on the edge of Mia's bed, reading from the chapter book they were working through. Some fantasy story about kids who discovered a magical door in their school. Mia's eyes drooped, her breathing slowing. Daddy? She mumbled. Yeah? Are you brave? The question caught him sideways. Sometimes. Why? Emma's dad said brave people do scary things even when they're scared. Is that true? Daniel thought about Aurora Vale's eyes, the weight of her expectations, the tightrope Marcus had mentioned. Yeah, Bug, that's true. Then you're brave, because you do scary things all the time. His throat tightened. Like what? Like taking care of me by yourself. Emma's dad said that's really hard. Daniel smoothed her hair back, the same gesture he'd done that morning, the same one he'd probably do 10,000 more times. You make it easy. Liar, she said, but she was smiling. He kissed her forehead, turned off the light, and pulled the door halfway closed. Back in the living room, Daniel opened his laptop and stared at the blank document titled Initial Strategy Framework. The cursor blinked, accusatory. What makes your approach different? He'd spent his entire career playing it safe, building strategies that worked because they were proven, reliable, low risk. He was good at it. Not brilliant, but good, solid, dependable. Aurora Vale didn't want dependable. She wanted exceptional. Daniel leaned back, closing his eyes. He thought about Mia's question, about bravery, about doing scary things even when you're terrified. And then he thought about something else, something Rebecca had mentioned in passing during their first conversation about the project. She'd said Aurora wanted emotional resonance. Everyone in media talked about emotional resonance. It was a buzzword, a checkbox on strategy documents. But what if it wasn't just a tactic? What if it was the entire foundation? Daniel sat forward, fingers hovering over the keyboard. News media had become transactional. Stories were content, audiences were metrics, success was measured in clicks and shares. Everything was optimized for performance, which meant nothing was optimized for meaning. But people didn't just want information. They wanted to feel something. They wanted to believe the stories they consumed mattered, that the act of paying attention had purpose. What if Meridian stopped trying to compete on speed or scale or even accuracy, because everyone claimed those things, and instead competed on depth? On stories that didn't just inform, but connected? On journalism that treated audiences like human beings instead of demographics? It was risky. It was completely untested at this scale. It would require restructuring everything from editorial processes to performance metrics. It was the opposite of safe. Daniel started typing. He worked until midnight building the skeleton of an argument. Not a full strategy, he didn't have time for that, but a philosophy, a lens, a way of thinking about news media that prioritized emotional truth alongside factual accuracy. He knew it was rough, knew it probably had holes he wasn't seeing, but it was honest. It was what he actually believed might work. And if Aurora Vale was testing whether he had a backbone, then this was the answer. He saved the document, closed his laptop, and collapsed into bed. 46 hours to go. The next day was chaos. Daniel worked through lunch, skipped coffee breaks, ignored emails from everyone except Rebecca. He refined his framework, added supporting data, cut everything that felt like padding. By Wednesday afternoon, he had something that almost looked like a coherent argument. Rebecca reviewed it at 4 p.m., sitting across from him in a conference room while he mentally prepared for evisceration. She read in silence, expression neutral. Finally, she looked up. This is either going to get you promoted or fired. That's what Cynthia said. Cynthia's smarter than she looks. Rebecca tapped the document. This is good, Daniel. It's genuinely good, but it's also completely insane. You're proposing we rebuild our entire news operation around a metric we can't measure. Emotional impact can be measured. Focus groups, sentiment analysis, long-term audience retention. Those are proxies. They're not the thing itself. She paused. But that's also what makes it interesting. You're not trying to optimize an existing system. You're proposing a different system entirely. Is that bad? It's dangerous, which is probably what she wants. Rebecca slid the document back across the table. Present it tomorrow, exactly as it is. Don't soften it. You sure? No, but I think you should do it anyway. Eat. That night, Daniel barely slept. He ran through the presentation a dozen times in his head, anticipating questions, preparing answers. Mia asked if he was okay at breakfast. He lied and said yes. Thursday morning arrived cold and gray, the kind of October day that promised winter wasn't far behind. Daniel dressed carefully. His best suit, the one he saved for important meetings, the one that almost made him look like he belonged in the same room as people like Aurora Vale. He arrived at the office early, printed copies of his framework, and sat at his desk reviewing notes until Rebecca appeared. Ready? She asked. No. Yes. Conference room A again. Same table, Same chairs, same wall-mounted screen. Rebecca set up the presentation. Daniel's hands were shaking slightly, so he shoved them in his pockets. Aurora arrived exactly on time, carrying a black leather portfolio and nothing else. No laptop, no phone. Just a pen and paper. She sat, crossed her legs, and looked at Daniel. Go. He took a breath and started. The problem isn't that people don't trust news media, he said. It's that they don't need it. Information is everywhere. Facts are free. What people actually need, what they're desperate for, is meaning, context, a reason to care. Aurora's expression didn't change. She just watched. Daniel clicked to the next slide. Every media company optimizes for engagement. Time on site, shares, clicks. We've built an entire industry around keeping people's attention. But we've forgotten to ask why we want their attention in the first place. He walked through this framework, how Meridian could shift from transactional news delivery to relational storytelling, how editorial processes could prioritize depth over speed, how success metrics could include long-term audience loyalty instead of just short-term traffic spikes. It took 12 minutes. When he finished, the room fell quiet. Aurora tapped her pen against her portfolio, studying him. You're proposing we slow down. Strategically, yes. Not because we can't move fast, but because the stories that matter take time to tell right. Our competitors will bury us. Our competitors are already burying us. We're losing because we're playing the same game everyone else is playing, just slightly worse. Daniel met her gaze. This is a different game entirely. It's also completely unproven. So was Meridian when you started it. The room went silent. Rebecca inhaled sharply. Aurora's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? Daniel's heart slammed against his ribs, but he didn't back down. You built this company by doing something no one else was doing. You didn't follow the market. You redefined it. I'm suggesting we do that again. For a long moment, Aurora just stared at him. Daniel couldn't read her expression. Couldn't tell if he'd just made the best argument of his career or committed professional suicide. Then she smiled. It was small, barely there, but unmistakable. Interesting, she said quietly. She stood, gathering her portfolio. I'll expect a full implementation roadmap by end of next week. Include budget projections, staffing requirements, and a pilot program proposal. She paused at the door. And Daniel? Don't ever compare yourself to me again. You haven't earned it yet. She left. Daniel exhaled, legs suddenly shaky. Rebecca was grinning. Holy shit. You didn't get fired. That's a win. She started packing up. You've got 1 week to turn that philosophy into an actual plan. I'd start now. Daniel walked back to his desk in a daze. His phone buzzed, a text from the school. Mia's class was doing a parent visit day next Friday. Could he attend? He typed back, wouldn't miss it. Then he opened a new document and got to work. Because whether this was the opportunity of a lifetime or the biggest mistake he'd ever make, there was no turning back now. The week that followed felt like being trapped in a pressure cooker with the heat turned up incrementally each day. Daniel worked 16-hour shifts, surviving on vending machine coffee and whatever takeout he could scarf down between revisions. The implementation roadmap sprawled across his desk in printouts, sticky notes, and half-coherent diagrams that made sense at 2 a.m. but looked insane by morning light. Mia noticed. She always noticed. You're tired, she said Thursday evening, watching him stir pasta sauce that had started smoking because he'd forgotten about it. Again. Just busy, bug. Busy tired or sick tired? What's the difference? She considered this with the gravity of a seasoned diagnostician. Busy tired goes away after you sleep. Sick tired doesn't. Daniel pulled the pan off the burner, dumping the burnt sauce down the disposal. Busy tired. Promise. You promised you'd help with my math homework Tuesday. Mrs. Chen did it instead. The guilt hit like a fist to the sternum. I know, I'm sorry, this project is important, I know. She didn't sound angry, which somehow made it worse. Just resigned, like she'd already learned not to expect better. Can we do something this weekend? Just us? Absolutely, whatever you want. Even if it's the planetarium again? Even if it's the planetarium again. Because. She smiled and Daniel felt the tightness in his chest ease slightly. He ordered pizza instead of attempting dinner, and they ate on the couch watching nature documentaries. Mia fell asleep halfway through an episode about penguins, her head on his shoulder, and Daniel sat there not moving, trying to memorize the weight of her, the sound of her breathing, the reminder that no matter how badly he screwed up at work, this was what mattered. Friday arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that made New York look almost beautiful. Daniel dressed in his second-best suit, the good one was at the dry cleaners, and took the subway to Meridian with his roadmap presentation loaded on a flash drive and backed up in 3 separate cloud accounts because paranoia felt justified. The presentation was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the executive conference room on the 42nd floor, a space Daniel had only seen in company-wide emails announcing quarterly earnings. Rebecca met him in the lobby carrying 2 coffees. "Drink this," she said, handing him one. "You look like you're about to pass out." "I might be." "Don't. At least not before the presentation." She pressed the elevator button. Aurora invited VP-level attendance. This isn't just her evaluating your plan. It's her testing whether it can survive scrutiny. Daniel's stomach dropped. "How many people?" 8, maybe 10. Don't panic. Just stick to your argument." The elevator climbed, Daniel's ears popping. When the doors opened on 42, the entire aesthetic changed. Downstairs was functional corporate, gray carpet, white walls, motivational posters about synergy. Up here was power. Hardwood floors, art that probably cost 6 figures, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan like a conquered kingdom. Rebecca led him to the conference room. It was massive, dominated by a table that could seat 20. 8 executives were already seated, including Marcus Chen, who gave Daniel a subtle nod. At the head of the table sat Aurora, scrolling through something on her tablet, expression unreadable. She glanced up when Daniel entered. "You're early." Traffic was light. She gestured to the empty chair beside her. "Set up. We'll start in 5. Daniel connected his laptop to the room's presentation system, hands steadier than he expected. The roadmap loaded. 63 slides detailing everything from editorial restructuring to audience research protocols to projected budget reallocations over 18 months. The room filled. More VPs, a couple of department heads Daniel recognized but had never spoken to. They took their seats with the careful choreography of people who knew exactly where they ranked in the pecking order. At 10 exactly, Aurora closed her tablet. "We're here to evaluate Daniel Brooks' proposal for the news division rebrand. He'll present, then we'll discuss. Questions during or after are fine. Interruptions that waste time are not." Her gaze swept the table. "Daniel, go." He stood, clicked to the first slide, and began. The presentation took 35 minutes. Daniel walked them through the philosophical framework first, the shift from transactional to relational storytelling, then into the tactical implementation. He divided the roadmap into 3 phases: immediate restructuring of editorial workflows, medium-term audience development through pilot programming, and long-term culture change across the entire news operation. He'd anticipated pushback, so he'd front-loaded the budget projections. Yes, this approach required upfront investment. Yes, the ROI timeline was longer than traditional metrics suggested. But the data supported it. Audiences were willing to pay premium prices for content they actually valued, and loyalty metrics showed that depth-driven programming generated exponentially higher lifetime value than clickbait-driven traffic. The room stayed quiet through most of it. Daniel couldn't tell if that was good or bad. When he finished, Aurora leaned back in her chair. "Thoughts?" Stephen Park, VP of Digital Operations, spoke first. "It's ambitious. Maybe too ambitious. We're talking about retraining an entire editorial staff, rebuilding production pipelines, and essentially gambling that audiences will reward us for slowing down in an environment that rewards speed." "Is that a criticism or an observation?" Aurora asked. "Criticism or an both?" "Then offer an alternative." Stephen hesitated. "I don't have one. I'm just saying the risk is significant. All transformation is risky." Next, Jennifer Oakes, head of audience development, tapped her pen against her notepad. "I like the philosophical foundation, but I'm concerned about measurement. How do we quantify emotional impact in a way that justifies budget allocation?" Daniel had prepared for this. We use a combination of sentiment analysis, long-term retention tracking, and qualitative focus groups. Instead of measuring success story by story, we measure it program by program over quarters. We're looking for patterns, not individual data points. That's vague. It's nuanced. There's a difference. Jennifer's eyebrows rose, but she didn't argue. Aurora's gaze was fixed on Daniel, expression unreadable. What about editorial resistance? You're asking journalists who've built careers on breaking news to suddenly prioritize depth over speed. That's a culture war waiting to happen, which is why Phase 1 includes editorial leadership buy-in before we roll anything out to staff. We pilot with volunteers, people who are already frustrated with the current model. We prove it works small-scale before we demand organization-wide change. And if it doesn't work small-scale, then we adjust or kill it, but we won't know until we try. Marcus spoke up. I've seen versions of this attempted at other outlets. They usually fail because management treats it like a branding exercise instead of an operational overhaul. You're proposing both. That's either visionary or delusional. Could be both, Daniel admitted. But doing nothing isn't an option. We're losing ground every quarter. Safe strategies got us here. They're not getting us out. The room fell quiet again. Daniel could feel his heartbeat in his throat. Aurora stood, walking to the windows. For a long moment, she just looked out at the city, hands clasped behind her back. Then she turned. I'm approving Phase 1. You'll have 6 weeks and a budget of $2.3 million. Recruit your pilot team, build the programming, test it. If the data supports scaling, we move to Phase 2. She paused. If it doesn't, we kill it, and you go back to your regular role. Clear? Daniel exhaled. Clear. Good. Everyone else, if you're not directly involved in implementation, you're dismissed. Daniel, Rebecca, Marcus, stay. The room emptied. When the door closed, Aurora returned to her seat. Marcus, I'm assigning you as operational lead. Daniel handles strategy and vision. You handle execution and logistics. Rebecca oversees timeline and budget. Any conflicts, you bring them to me immediately. I don't want this failing because you couldn't figure out how to communicate. Marcus nodded. Understood. Daniel, you'll present progress updates every Friday at 9 a.m. In person, not over email. I want to see what's working and what's breaking in real time. Got it. Aurora studied him for a moment, something shifting in her expression. Not softness exactly, but something less sharp. You stood up in front of a room full of people who've been doing this twice as long as you and told them they were thinking about it wrong. That takes either courage or stupidity. Probably both. The corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile. Get to work. The next 2 weeks blurred into a relentless grind of recruitment, planning, and crisis management. Daniel and Marcus assembled a team of 12, 8 journalists, 2 producers, a researcher, and a video editor, all of them volunteers who'd responded to an internal call for people willing to experiment with a new approach. The team was a mix. Some were young, eager, looking to prove themselves. Others were veterans, burned out on the daily churn of breaking news, and desperate for something that felt meaningful again. Daniel interviewed each one personally, asking the same question, why do you want to do this? The answers varied, but the theme was consistent. They were tired of producing content that disappeared into the void. Tired of stories that got clicks but didn't matter. Tired of optimizing for metrics that had nothing to do with journalism. Daniel got it. He was tired too. They set up a dedicated workspace on the 15th floor, a corner section that had been used for storage. It wasn't glamorous. Old desks, mismatched chairs, whiteboards salvaged from a conference room remodel. But it was theirs. They called it the lab, half joking, half serious. The first editorial meeting was chaos. Everyone had ideas, and no one agreed on priorities. Daniel let them argue for 90 minutes before stepping in. Stop, he said, loud enough to cut through the noise. We're not brainstorming features, we're identifying problems. What stories are we not telling because the current system won't support them? The room quieted. Then Sarah Chen, one of the veteran reporters, spoke up. There's a housing crisis story I've been trying to get approved for 8 months. Multi-part investigative series on how private equity firms are buying up affordable housing and converting it to luxury rentals. It's important, but it's long form. and it won't generate traffic fast enough to justify the resources. That's exactly what we need, Daniel said. What else? The floodgates opened. Stories about healthcare deserts in rural communities, the collapse of local journalism ecosystems, climate migration patterns, wage theft in immigrant communities. Stories that required time, depth, resources. Stories that mattered. By the end of the meeting, they had 6 potential pilots. Daniel told them to pick one and run with it. They chose Sarah's housing investigation. Production started immediately. Sarah worked with 2 other reporters and the research lead, digging into property records, interviewing displaced tenants, tracking corporate ownership structures. The producers built out a visual approach that combined documentary footage with data visualization. The editor experimented with pacing that prioritized emotional storytelling without sacrificing factual rigor. Daniel checked in daily, offering feedback, troubleshooting problems, running interference when other departments complained about resource allocation. Marcus handled the logistics, booking interview locations, coordinating with legal, managing budget burn rates. It was exhausting. It was also the most energized Daniel had felt in years. The first Friday progress meeting with Aurora was nerve-wracking. Daniel presented production updates, preliminary footage, early audience testing results from a small focus group. Aurora watched the rough cut in silence, face unreadable. When it finished, she looked at him. The pacing is slow. Intentionally, we're trying to build emotional investment. Will audiences sit through 12 minutes of this? The focus group did. Retention was 93%. Focus groups lie. Not about whether they're bored. Aurora leaned back, considering. Show me the next cut in 2 weeks, and get better B-roll for the tenant interviews. The current footage looks cheap. It wasn't praise, but it wasn't criticism either. Daniel took it as a win. Outside the conference room, Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. You're still alive. That's progress. She hated it. She didn't hate it. She's just recalibrating expectations. Marcus headed toward the elevator. You coming to the team happy hour tonight? Can't. I promised Mia we'd do something this weekend. Fair. Tell her Marcus says hi. Daniel had forgotten about the planetarium promise until Mia reminded him Saturday morning at breakfast. They took the subway to the Upper West Side, joining the weekend crowds of families and tourists. The planetarium was packed, but Mia didn't care. She dragged Daniel through every exhibit, narrating facts about star formation and black holes and the possibility of life on Europa. In the Dome Theater, they watched a show about the search for exoplanets. Mia was transfixed, and Daniel found himself watching her instead of the screen. The way her eyes went wide during the simulated journey through space. The way she whispered, "Whoa," when the narrator described planets with diamond rain. Afterward, they got hot dogs from a street cart and sat on a bench in Central Park. "Daddy," Mia said, swinging her legs. "Do you think there are people on other planets?" "Maybe. Probably not nearby, but somewhere out there? Could be." "Do you think they have jobs and meetings and bosses?" Daniel laughed. "Why would you ask that?" "Because you've been working a lot. I was wondering if people everywhere have to work a lot, or if it's just here." The question landed heavier than she probably meant it. "I'm sorry I've been so busy, Bug. This project, it won't always be like this." "It's okay. Mrs. Chen says you're doing important stuff." "Yay. Mrs. Chen talks to you about my work?" "She said you're trying to make something better. Is that true?" Daniel thought about the lab, about Sarah's housing investigation, about the possibility that they might actually produce something that mattered. "Yeah, I'm trying." "Then it's okay if you're busy, just not forever." "Not forever," he agreed. They spent the rest of the afternoon in the park, feeding ducks stale bread Mia had brought in her backpack, playing on the playground until the sun started dropping. On the subway ride home, Mia fell asleep against his side, and Daniel held her carefully, acutely aware of how fast she was growing, how many moments like this he'd already missed. Monday came too fast. The housing investigation was nearing completion, and the pressure ramped up. Sarah's team had uncovered more than expected, not just private equity firms buying properties, but a network of shell companies obscuring ownership, connections to city officials, approving rezoning requests, tenant displacement patterns that mapped almost perfectly to gentrification corridors. It was explosive. It was also complicated, requiring careful legal review and multiple rounds of fact-checking. Daniel worked closely with Sarah, helping shape the narrative structure, pushing her to foreground the human stories without losing the investigative depth. They argued constantly. Sarah wanted to lead with the data. Daniel wanted to lead with a displaced family. But the arguments were productive, sharpening the work instead of derailing it. By the third week of November, they had a 40-minute documentary-style piece that felt unlike anything Meridian had produced before. It was slower, denser, angrier. It demanded attention instead of begging for it. They screened it for Aurora on a Friday morning. She watched in silence, taking notes. When it ended, she set down her pen. "It's good." Daniel waited for the other shoe to drop. "It's also a liability. You're accusing powerful people of corruption. Legal will need to vet every claim. PR will need a crisis plan for the inevitable backlash. And you need a distribution strategy that maximizes impact without getting us sued into oblivion. We've got legal review scheduled for Monday, PR briefing Wednesday. Then you're ahead of schedule." Aurora stood. "I want this ready to publish in 3 weeks. That gives you time to refine, promote, and prepare for the shitstorm that's coming." You think it'll work?" She looked at him, and for the first time he saw something that might have been respect. "I think it's exactly the kind of story we should be telling. Whether audiences agree remains to be seen." The next 3 weeks were brutal. Legal flagged 12 sections requiring additional sourcing. PR ran crisis simulations that ranged from minor complaints to full-blown advertiser boycotts. Daniel coordinated with Marcus on every detail, refining copy, adjusting visuals, running endless rounds of internal review. The team started showing strain. Sarah snapped at a producer over B-roll selection. One of the reporters called in sick for 3 days straight. The editor threatened to quit after the 7th round of notes. Daniel held it together by sheer force of will, mediating conflicts, solving problems, reminding everyone why they'd signed up for this in the first place. At home, things frayed. He missed Mia's parent visit day at school because a legal review ran late. Forgot to pay the electricity bill until the lights shut off. Burned dinner so many times that Mia started keeping the takeout menus organized by cuisine type. "You're doing the sick-tired thing," she said one night, watching him stare blankly at his laptop. "I'm fine. You're lying." Daniel closed the laptop. "What gave it away, guys?" "You forgot my name this morning. Called me Bug 3 times before you remembered Mia." He rubbed his face. "I'm sorry." "It's okay, but maybe you should sleep." "Can't. Publishing next week." "Then sleep after." Deal. Launch day was set for December 10th, a Wednesday chosen specifically to dominate the news cycle midweek. Meridian promoted it across every platform: social media teasers, email campaigns, on-air promos during evening broadcasts. The PR team briefed key journalists at other outlets, seeding the story in advance to build anticipation. Daniel barely slept the night before. He kept refreshing analytics dashboards, checking server capacity, running through contingency plans for every possible failure scenario. At 6 a.m., Shachi Itbal Yimamtao, the piece went live. By 7, it had 50,000 views. By 8, 120,000. By 9, the mayor's office had released a statement calling the reporting reckless and irresponsible. By 10, 3 city council members were demanding investigations into the companies named in the documentary. By noon, it had crossed 500,000 views and trending nationally on social media. Daniel sat at his desk, watching the numbers climb, feeling something between exhilaration and nausea. Marcus leaned over his cubicle wall. "We might have actually done it. Or committed career suicide, hard to tell. Either way, it's historic." Aurora called an emergency meeting at 2 p.m. The entire pilot team crammed into the conference room, bracing for either celebration or execution. Aurora stood at the head of the table, arms crossed. "Congratulations, you've started a war." The room went silent. Then she smiled. Not the small, carefully controlled expression Daniel had seen before. A real smile, sharp and satisfied. "The city comptroller just announced an audit of all private equity real estate transactions from the past 5 years. 2 of the companies you named have issued statements promising to suspend tenant displacement actions pending review. And we've had 4 other outlets request interviews with Sarah to discuss the investigative process." Sarah looked like she might cry. "So we're not fired?" You're the opposite of fired. You've proven the model works. Aurora's gaze shifted to Daniel, which means Phase 2 is approved. Effective immediately, you're scaling this approach to 6 additional pilot programs. Budget is increased to $8 million. Staff allocation will be finalized by Friday. Daniel's brain stalled. $8 million. Is that a problem? No, just that's a lot of trust. Gus, it's not trust, it's data. The piece is performing 37% above our most optimistic projections. Audience retention is double our network average. Social sentiment is overwhelmingly positive, even accounting for the political backlash. You delivered exactly what you promised. Now do it again. The meeting ended in a daze. The team filtered out, buzzing with energy and relief. Daniel stayed behind, still processing. Aurora gathered her things, then paused. You look exhausted. I'm exhausted. Take tomorrow off. Spend time with your daughter. This is a marathon, not a sprint. It was the first personal thing she'd said to him that wasn't a criticism. Thanks. She nodded and left. Daniel sat alone in the conference room, staring at the wall-mounted screen still displaying the analytics dashboard. 500,000 views and climbing. Impact rippling outward in ways he hadn't fully anticipated. He thought about Mia asking if there were people on other planets who had to work all the time. Thought about her organizing takeout menus and telling him he was doing sick tired instead of busy tired. He pulled out his phone and texted Mrs. Chen. Taking tomorrow off. Can you let Mia know I'll pick her up from school? The reply came back immediately. About time. Daniel took the subway home, stopped at the grocery store, bought ingredients for actual dinner. When Mia came home, he was already cooking real food, not burnt sauce or forgotten pasta. She dropped her backpack, eyes wide. Are you okay? Better than okay. Come here. She ran over and he pulled her into a hug, holding on longer than usual. Your thing worked? She asked, muffled against his shoulder. My thing worked. Good. Does that mean you're done being busy? Daniel thought about the $8 million budget, the 6 new pilots, the marathon Aurora had mentioned. Not done. But better. I promise. Okay? She pulled back. Can we have dessert? Absolutely. They ate dinner together. Actual vegetables, protein that wasn't from a delivery container, conversation that didn't feel rushed. After, they made cookies from a mix, burning the first batch and laughing about it instead of ordering replacements. That night, tucking Mia into bed, Daniel felt something shift. Not relief exactly, but clarity. The work mattered. The impact was real. But so was this. The weight of his daughter's head on the pillow, the sound of her breathing evening out, the knowledge that he'd kept his promise. Daddy? She mumbled, half asleep. Yeah, Bug? I'm proud of you. His throat tightened. I'm proud of you too. I didn't do anything. You did everything. She smiled, eyes already closed, and Daniel sat there until he was sure she was asleep, thinking about how success looked different depending on where you stood, and how the most important victories were often the quietest ones. The success didn't make things easier. If anything, it made them harder. By mid-January, the lab had expanded to 43 people spread across 6 active investigations. Daniel's days became an endless rotation of editorial meetings, budget reviews, crisis management, and presentations to Aurora that felt less like updates and more like interrogations. The pressure wasn't just internal anymore. The housing documentary had put a target on Meridian's back. Competitors were circling, political figures were hostile, and every new story the lab touched became a potential landmine. Daniel was running on 4 hours of sleep and spite. The Friday morning meetings with Aurora had become a ritual he both dreaded and needed. She was relentless, dissecting every decision, questioning every assumption, pushing him harder than anyone ever had. But she was also fair. When something worked, she said so. When it didn't, she explained why with surgical precision instead of just tearing it down. The problem was that lately, Daniel had been disagreeing with her more often than not. It started small. A dispute over whether to publish an investigation into pharmaceutical pricing before or after earnings season. Aurora wanted to wait, maximize impact when the market was paying attention. Daniel argued that delayed publication meant delayed accountability, and people were suffering now, not in 3 months. They'd compromised, which meant neither of them got what they wanted. Then there was the fight over the education series. Aurora wanted a broad national focus: charter schools, funding inequities, teacher shortages across multiple states. Daniel pushed for hyperlocal, one neighborhood in the Bronx, one failing school, the specific families being failed by specific policy decisions. "You're thinking too small," Aurora had said, arms crossed in that way that meant she'd already made up her mind. "I'm thinking about emotional resonance. We can't connect with audiences if we're trying to tell everyone's story at once. We can't drive systemic change if we're only examining one building. We can if we do it right. One story that represents thousands." She'd stared at him for a long moment. "You're arguing with me. You told me not to bullshit you. I'm not." "Yes, sorry, we're right." Something had flickered across her face. Annoyance, maybe, or something else he couldn't identify. "Fine. Hyperlocal. But if the data doesn't support scaling, we kill it immediately. Deal." That was 3 weeks ago. Now, the education piece was in final production, and the data was mixed. Strong emotional engagement, but lower overall viewership than the housing documentary. Not a failure, but not a home run either. Daniel knew Aurora was going to push him on it during this morning's meeting. He'd prepared counterarguments, alternate metrics, qualitative evidence from community response. He was ready for a fight. What he wasn't ready for was walking into the conference room and finding her looking like she'd been up all night. Aurora sat at the table, no tablet, no portfolio, just a coffee cup she wasn't drinking from. Her hair was still perfect, suit still immaculate, but there were shadows under her eyes that makeup didn't quite hide. "You okay?" Daniel asked before he could stop himself. She looked up, surprised. "Why wouldn't I be?" "You look tired." "I'm always tired. Sit down." He sat, pulling out his laptop. "I've got the education piece metrics ready. Sauce." "Forget the education piece. We have a bigger problem." She slid a folder across the table. Internal audit flagged irregularities in the lab's budget allocation. Someone's been moving funds between projects without proper authorization. Daniel's stomach dropped. "What kind of irregularities?" The $23,000 shifted from the education budget to the healthcare investigation. Another 15 moved from operations to freelance payments, all done through Marcus's access codes. Arsts. Marcus wouldn't... I'm not accusing Marcus. I'm telling you what the audit found. Either he's sloppy, or someone's using his credentials without authorization. Or there's a problem we don't know about yet. Aurora's gaze was sharp. "This is your team, your responsibility. Fix it." Daniel opened the folder, scanning the flagged transactions. The dates were scattered across the past 6 weeks. The amounts weren't huge individually, but together they painted a picture of someone playing fast and loose with financial controls. "I'll talk to Marcus today. Get to the bottom of it." "You'll do more than that. You'll implement new oversight protocols, require dual authorization for any budget shifts over $5,000, and submit a full accounting by Monday." She paused. "And Daniel, if this turns out to be intentional fraud, everyone involved is gone. I don't care how good the work is." "Understood." She dismissed him with a nod, and Daniel left feeling like he'd been punched in the chest. He found Marcus in the lab, reviewing footage for the healthcare piece. When Daniel explained the situation, Marcus went pale. "I didn't move any funds," he said immediately. "I mean, I've authorized budget adjustments, but always with proper documentation, always through the system. Show me." They spent 2 hours going through Marcus's transaction history, cross-referencing approvals with the audit report. Most of it matched up clean. But there were 3 transactions, 2 small, 1 larger, that Marcus had no record of authorizing. "Someone's using my credentials," Marcus said, voice tight. "Or the system's glitching. Either way, this looks bad. We need IT to trace the access logs, find out where these transactions originated." They pulled in Meridian's IT security team, who launched an investigation that took the rest of the day and produced an answer that made everything worse. The unauthorized transactions had come from a terminal in the lab during off hours, late nights and early mornings when most of the team was gone. The login credentials were Marcus's, but the access pattern didn't match his usual behavior. Someone had either stolen his password or been logging in when he wasn't around. "Who has access to the lab after hours?" the IT lead asked. Daniel thought about it. The whole team, technically. We all have badge access. Some people work weird hours. Any friction within the team? Anyone with motivation to sabotage? No, everyone's been solid. Even as he said it, Daniel wasn't sure. 43 people meant 43 different agendas, pressures, personal situations he knew nothing about. The IT lead handed him a report. These are the access logs for the past 2 months. You'll want to cross-reference who was in the building when these transactions occurred. Daniel took the report back to his desk and started digging. The pattern that emerged was thin but present. The same person had badged into the lab within an hour of each unauthorized transaction. Ryan Delgado, one of the researchers, mid-20s, sharp but quiet. He'd been with the lab since the beginning, recruited because of his talent for data analysis and his relentless work ethic. Daniel's hands shook slightly as he called Marcus. I think I know who it is. They confronted Ryan the next morning in one of the empty conference rooms. Daniel had rehearsed what to say, trying to balance directness with compassion. But the moment Ryan walked in and saw both of them waiting, his face crumpled. I know why you called me, he said quietly, sitting down. I didn't think anyone would notice. Marcus exhaled hard. Why? My mom's sick, cancer, stage 4. She's doing experimental treatment that insurance won't cover, and I'm helping with bills. Ryan's voice cracked. I wasn't stealing. I moved some funds around temporarily. I was planning to pay it back once my tax refund came through. Daniel felt anger and sympathy warring in his chest. You committed fraud, Ryan. You used someone else's credentials to move company money without authorization. That's not borrowing, that's theft. I know. I didn't know what else to do. She's my mom. The room went quiet. Daniel thought about Mia, about what he'd do if she were sick and he couldn't afford treatment. The answer scared him. You should have come to us, Marcus said, softer than Daniel expected. We could have helped. Set up a loan, connected you with resources, something. I didn't want to be a problem. Everyone's already working so hard. I thought I could handle it myself. Daniel rubbed his face. I have to report this to Aurora. You know that. Ryan nodded, tears spilling over. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Daniel walked him out, told him to go home. Wait for next steps. Then he went straight to Aurora's office and explained everything. She listened in silence, expression unreadable. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair. What do you think we should do? She asked. The question caught him off guard. You're asking me. It's your team. You built it. What happens next matters to them, not just to Ryan. Daniel thought about it, about the precedent it set, the message it sent, the human being at the center of it all. We fire him. We have to. He committed fraud, and if we don't enforce consequences, we undermine every financial control we have. Agreed. What else? We set up an emergency assistance fund for staff facing financial crisis. Make it official, with oversight, so this doesn't happen again. And we do a full team meeting, explain what happened without throwing Ryan under the bus, reinforce the importance of coming forward when people are struggling. Aurora studied him. You're going to lose a credibility with some people. They'll think you're heartless for firing someone whose mother has cancer. Maybe, but keeping him sends the message that desperation justifies breaking the rules. That's worse. She nodded slowly. Do it. And Daniel, set up that assistance fund with HR by end of week. You were right. We should have had it already. Ryan was terminated that afternoon. The team meeting happened Friday morning. Daniel explained what had occurred in terms that were honest but not cruel, emphasizing the systemic failure that had allowed someone to reach that level of desperation without support. The room was tense, some people angry, others sympathetic, a few clearly scared about their own job security. After, Sarah cornered him in the hallway. That was brutal. Had to be done. I know. Doesn't make it easier. She hesitated. For what it's worth, I think you handled it right. But people are watching you now, wondering if you're becoming like the rest of them. The rest of who? Management. The people who make decisions from 40 floors up and forget what it's like down here. The accusation stung because it wasn't entirely wrong. Daniel had been spending more time in conference rooms than in the lab lately, more time managing budgets than shaping stories. He was becoming the thing he'd never wanted to be. "I'll do better," he said. "See that you do." February brought a cold snap that turned New York brutal. Daniel's apartment heater rattled and wheezed, but barely managed to keep the temperature livable. Mia started sleeping in 2 layers of pajamas, and Daniel bought extra blankets they couldn't really afford. Work didn't slow down. The education piece published to respectful but not spectacular results. The healthcare investigation uncovered insurance company practices that bordered on criminal, generating solid viewership and a congressional inquiry. 2 more projects were in active production, both showing promise. But the rhythm had changed. Daniel found himself second-guessing decisions, triple-checking budgets, watching his team for signs of stress or burnout or desperation. The Ryan situation had shaken something loose in him, made him realize how little he actually knew about the people he was supposedly leading. He started having one-on-ones with everyone, not about work, but about life. Most people were guarded at first, but eventually they opened up. Student loans, aging parents, medical bills, relationship problems, the crushing cost of living in New York. Everyone was carrying something heavy. Daniel took notes, connected people with resources, advocated for raises where he could. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Meanwhile, his interactions with Aurora were becoming increasingly complicated. They still met every Friday, still argued about strategy and priorities and execution. But the arguments had developed an edge that felt personal rather than professional. She pushed him harder, questioned his decisions more aggressively, demanded justifications that went beyond data into philosophy and values. And Daniel pushed back just as hard. "You're treating journalism like a product," he said during one heated exchange about audience metrics. "Optimizing for performance instead of impact." "Impact requires an audience," Aurora shot back. "If no one's watching, nothing changes. But if we're only making what audiences already want, we're not challenging them. We're just confirming their existing beliefs." That's naive. You can't change minds if you can't reach them in the first place. You can't reach them if you've sacrificed everything that makes the work meaningful. The room went silent. They were standing now, across the conference table from each other, the air crackling with tension. Aurora's eyes were cold. "You think I don't care about meaning? You think I built this company just to maximize shareholder value? I think you've forgotten what it's like to make something without calculating the ROI first. Ostie, yes. And I think you're so obsessed with purity that you can't see when compromise is necessary." They stared at each other, neither willing to back down. Finally, Aurora looked away. "Get out. We're done for today." Daniel left, adrenaline still pumping, unsure if he'd just won or lost. He didn't see her for a week after that. Their Friday meeting got postponed, then canceled entirely. Marcus handled the check-ins, and Daniel told himself he was relieved. But he wasn't. He was unsettled. The fight had revealed something neither of them had said out loud, that this wasn't just about work anymore, that somewhere along the way, it had become personal. The realization sat in his chest like a stone. At home, Mia was going through a phase where she wanted to know everything about everything. Why did clouds float? How did airplanes stay up? What happened to people after they died? Daniel answered as best he could, grateful for questions that had answers, unlike most of the ones in his head. "Daddy, do you like your boss?" she asked one night, out of nowhere. Daniel looked up from the dishes. "Why do you ask?" "You make a different face when you talk about her. Not the work face, a different one." "What kind of face?" Mia scrunched up her features, trying to demonstrate. "Like you're confused and mad at the same time." Daniel laughed despite himself. "That's pretty accurate. So do you like her or not?" "It's complicated." That's what grown-ups always say when they don't want to answer. Okay, fine. She's brilliant and terrifying and impossible to work with, and I respect her more than almost anyone I've ever met. Does that answer your question? Mia considered this. "Do you think she likes you?" "I have no idea." "You should ask her." "That's not really how work relationships function, Bug." "Why not?" "Because adults were cowards who avoided difficult conversations until they became impossible ones. Because it's complicated." Mia rolled her eyes, unimpressed. Mia rolled her. The education piece won an award in March. Not a major one, but legitimate recognition from a journalism foundation that mattered. Aurora sent a company-wide email congratulating the team, and Daniel felt a ridiculous surge of pride. The awards ceremony was held at a hotel in Midtown, a formal dinner affair with speeches and networking and the kind of forced socializing Daniel normally avoided. But the team wanted to go, so he went, wearing the suit that still almost fit and trying not to feel like an imposter. Aurora was there, seated at a different table with board members and executives Daniel had never met. She looked stunning in a black dress that probably cost more than his monthly rent, hair down for once instead of pulled back, laughing at something someone said. Daniel tried not to stare and failed completely. During the reception after dinner, he found himself near the bar at the same time she approached for a drink. "Congratulations," she said, not looking at him. "Your team earned this." "Thanks. They worked hard." "So did you." The acknowledgement caught him off guard. "We still disagreed about the approach." "We did. You were right." She accepted her drink from the bartender, took a sip. The hyperlocal focus worked. The emotional specificity connected in ways a broader approach wouldn't have. "Are you admitting I won an argument?" "I'm admitting the data supported your hypothesis. That's different." She glanced at him, and something in her expression was different. Softer, maybe, or just tired. "You're a pain in my ass, Daniel Brooks. But you're also one of the smartest strategists I've worked with. Don't let it go to your head." Before he could respond, someone called her name, and she drifted away, leaving Daniel standing there holding a drink he didn't remember ordering. Marcus appeared at his elbow. "Did Aurora Vale just compliment you?" "I think so. I'm not sure." "Man, you're either about to get promoted or fired. With her, it's always one or the other." The night wound down. Daniel took the subway home, replaying the conversation in his head, trying to decode what it meant. Probably nothing. Probably just professional respect expressed in the only way Aurora knew how. But the way she'd looked at him suggested otherwise. April brought warmer weather and mounting pressure. The lab was preparing to launch its most ambitious project yet, a 6-part series on criminal justice reform that had taken 4 months to produce. The scope was massive, the stakes were high, and Daniel was barely holding it together. He'd been working 70-hour weeks, surviving on coffee and takeout, missing more of Mia's school events than he attended. The guilt was crushing, but the alternative was letting down 43 people who depended on him and a project that could actually change policy. The Friday before the launch, Aurora called an emergency executive review, not just for the lab leadership, but for every department head involved in promotion and distribution. The conference room was packed. Daniel presented the series overview, the editorial approach, the distribution strategy. He'd practiced the pitch a dozen times, knew every slide by heart. Halfway through, Aurora interrupted. "This is too cautious," she said. Daniel stopped. "Excuse me? Your distribution plan. You're treating this like a standard release, phased rollout, targeted promotion, conservative timeline. This isn't standard. This is the most important work we've done all year. We should be leading with it, not tiptoeing around it. We're being strategic, building momentum over... You're being afraid." Aurora stood, walking to the front of the room. "You've spent 6 months building credibility. Now you're scared to spend it. This is exactly when we should be taking risks." Daniel felt heat rising in his face. "We're not scared. We're being responsible. If we overpromise and underdeliver, then we learn and adjust. But playing it safe guarantees mediocrity." She turned to the room. "We're launching all 6 parts simultaneously. Full promotional push across every platform. Primetime placement on broadcast. I want this unavoidable." The room erupted in overlapping objections. Too risky, too expensive, too aggressive. Aurora cut through it all with surgical precision, dismantling every argument, making the case for why bold action was the only option that made sense. Daniel stood there, feeling control of his own project slip away. When the room quieted, Aurora looked at him. "Unless you have a better argument?" He did. He had data showing that serialized releases generated better long-term engagement. He had focus group feedback suggesting audiences preferred digestible increments over marathon viewing. He had every logical reason why her approach was reckless. But he also had the memory of her saying he was right about the education piece. Had the knowledge that her instincts, however aggressive, were usually sound. Had the growing realization that maybe he was being cautious, not because it was smart, but because he was terrified of failing on a bigger stage. No, he said quietly. No better argument. Aurora's expression didn't change, but something passed between them. Acknowledgement, maybe, or challenge. Then we launch in 1 week. Everyone clear on their assignments? The room nodded, and the meeting dissolved into frantic planning. Afterward, Daniel found himself alone in the hallway with Aurora. You undermined me in there, he said, trying to keep his voice level. I corrected a strategic error. It was my project, my call, and I'm still your boss. When I think you're wrong, I'm going to say so. She crossed her arms. You're angry. Yeah, I'm angry. You could have talked to me privately first instead of overruling me in front of the entire executive team. Would you have listened? I don't know. You didn't give me the chance. Aurora was quiet for a moment. You're right. I should have talked to you first. That was a mistake. The apology shocked him more than the disagreement had. Okay, thank you. But I'm not wrong about the strategy. You're playing it safe because you're scared, and fear makes you small. I'm not scared. I'm being realistic about you're terrified of failure, of success, of what happens if this actually works. I recognize it because I used to be the same way. She stepped closer, and Daniel could smell her perfume, something expensive and clean. You're better than this, Daniel. Stop hiding behind caution and trust what you've built. Her voice was low, intense, and standing this close, Daniel could see the faint lines around her eyes, the small imperfection in her otherwise flawless composure. I'm not hiding, he said, but it sounded weak even to him. Yes, you are, and it's getting in your way. She held his gaze for another beat, then stepped back. 1 week. Prove me right. She walked away, leaving Daniel standing in the empty hallway, heart pounding, unsure if he wanted to punch a wall or chase after her. The next 7 days were chaos incarnate. The team worked around the clock, coordinating with every department, finalizing edits, running promotion, managing logistics. Daniel slept in his office 2 nights, survived on vending machine food, and the determination that had gotten him this far. Launch day arrived with spring rain and mounting anxiety. The series went live at 8 p.m., all 6 parts simultaneously across every platform. Daniel watched from the lab surrounded by his team, monitoring analytics in real time. The first hour was slow. Then something shifted. Social media started picking it up. News outlets began covering it. By 10 p.m., it was trending nationally. By midnight, it had crossed 2 million views. By morning, 4 senators had issued statements calling for hearings on the issues raised in the series. Daniel sat at his desk, exhausted and exhilarated, watching the numbers climb and the impact ripple outward in ways he'd barely imagined possible. His phone buzzed, a text from Aurora. Told you so. Despite everything, the exhaustion, the stress, the complicated knot of feelings he didn't want to examine, Daniel smiled. The success should have felt like vindication. Instead, it felt like standing on a ledge that kept getting narrower. By mid-May, the criminal justice series had generated 12 million views, inspired legislative action in 4 states, and put Meridian's news division back on the cultural map. Daniel's inbox overflowed with interview requests, speaking invitations, headhunters dangling offers from competitors. The lab had become the most talked-about journalism initiative in the industry, and Aurora had decided it was time to scale nationally. She announced it during a board meeting Daniel wasn't supposed to attend, but got pulled into at the last minute. The plan was aggressive to the point of recklessness, tripling the lab's budget, expanding to satellite offices in 3 cities, recruiting top talent from legacy outlets, and restructuring Meridian's entire news operation around the model they'd built. Daniel sat in the back of the room listening to Aurora present the vision with absolute certainty, watching board members nod along, and felt panic crawling up his throat. After, he cornered her in his hallway. We're not ready for this. Aurora didn't break stride. You said the same thing about the simultaneous launch. You were wrong then too. That was one project. This is systemic transformation across multiple markets with teams we haven't hired yet and infrastructure that doesn't exist. So we build it. Aurora will collapse under our own weight. The team's already stretched thin. If we scale this fast, She stopped walking, turning to face him. What's the alternative? Keep the lab small and contained? Watch competitors copy what we've built while we play it safe? You've proven the model works. Now we capitalize on a momentum before the window closes. Or we destroy what we've built by growing too fast. You don't grow a company by being timid, Daniel. You grow it by taking calculated risks when the opportunity presents itself. This isn't calculated. This is gambling. Aurora's eyes went cold. Are you saying you can't do this? The question hung between them like a blade. Daniel could feel other executives passing by, pretending not to listen, but absolutely listening. I'm saying we need more time to build the foundation properly. We don't have more time. The board approved this. Implementation starts in 3 weeks. She crossed her arms. If you're not up for it, tell me now so I can find someone who is. It was a challenge and a threat wrapped together. Daniel felt anger flash hot in his chest. I'm up for it, but when this crashes, don't act surprised. When it succeeds, I'll remind you that you doubted it. She walked away, heels clicking against marble, leaving Daniel standing there feeling like he'd just been outmaneuvered and wasn't entirely sure how. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in controlled chaos. Daniel worked with HR to post job listings for 37 new positions. He coordinated with real estate to secure office space in Chicago, Atlanta, and Los Angeles. He revised budgets, built org charts, designed onboarding processes for people who didn't exist yet. At home, things were disintegrating. He missed Mia's spring concert because of a late meeting with the Chicago team leads. Forgot to sign her permission slip for a field trip, which meant she couldn't go and spent the day in the library instead. Snapped at her when she asked for help with homework because his brain was too fried to remember 4th grade fractions. You're being mean, she said quietly, eyes filling with tears. The guilt hit like a physical blow. Daniel set down his laptop, pulled her into his lap. You're right. I'm sorry, Bug. I'm not being fair to you. You're always working now, even when you're home. You're not really here. I know, I'm trying to. This project is just really important right now. More important than me? The question gutted him. No, never more important than you. Then why does it feel like it is? Daniel didn't have an answer that wasn't a lie or an excuse. He just held her, feeling like the world's worst father, wondering how everything had gotten so twisted around. Mrs. Chen gave him an earful the next morning when he dropped Mia off. That child needs her father, not a ghost who pays rent. Whatever you're chasing at that job, ask yourself if it's worth what you're losing here. I'm providing for her, making sure we're secure. She doesn't need security. She needs you. Mrs. Chen's expression softened. I know you're doing your best, Daniel, but your best isn't enough if you're not present for it. The words haunted him all day. He tried to focus during meetings, but his mind kept circling back to Mia's question. More important than me, when had work stopped being about providing for her and started being about proving something to Aurora, to himself, to everyone who'd ever doubted him? The Friday meeting with Aurora came around again. Daniel arrived with his expansion progress report and a splitting headache. Aurora was already there, reviewing something on her tablet. She looked up when he entered. You look terrible. Thanks. You always know just what to say. I'm serious. When's the last time you slept? Does passing out at my desk count? No. She set down the tablet. Take the weekend off. You're no good to anyone like this. Wuxi. Can't. Chicago team orientation is Monday. I need to prep. Marcus can handle it. It's my responsibility. And you're about to collapse from exhaustion. That helps no one. Aurora stood, walking around the desk. Daniel, I need you functional. Not burned out and making mistakes because you're too stubborn to rest. I'm fine. You're lying. Badly. She studied him with that sharp gaze that always made him feel like she was seeing straight through whatever mask he wore. What's actually going on? The question cracked something open. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the weight of carrying everything alone for too long. But Daniel found himself answering honestly. I'm drowning. The expansion. The team, trying to be present for Mia, trying to meet your standards, trying to prove I deserve this. All of it's too much, and I don't know how to ask for help without looking weak. Aurora was quiet for a moment. You think asking for help makes you weak? Doesn't it? It makes you human. She leaned against the desk, arms crossed. I built this company alone because I didn't trust anyone else to care as much as I did. You know where that got me? 4 years of 16-hour days, 2 stress-related hospitalizations, and a realization that I was going to kill myself trying to prove I didn't need anyone. Daniel blinked. He'd never heard her talk about herself like that. What changed? I hired Rebecca, told her everything I was trying to do, and admitted I couldn't do it alone. She built out the operations infrastructure that actually made this company functional. Aurora's expression shifted to something almost vulnerable. Asking for help isn't weakness, Daniel. It's strategy. You can't scale yourself. You have to build systems and trust people. I do trust people. Then prove it. Delegate the Chicago orientation to Marcus. Let Sarah handle the Atlanta hiring. Stop trying to control every detail and focus on the parts only you can do. Which parts are those? Vision, direction, making sure we don't lose sight of why we're doing this in the first place. She paused. And being a father to your daughter, that's not something you can delegate. The fact that she knew about Mia's situation shouldn't have surprised him. Aurora paid attention to everything, but hearing her acknowledge it felt unexpectedly grounding. Okay, Daniel said. I'll take the weekend. Delegate the orientation. Good. Now get out of here before I change my mind. What? Daniel went home, picked Mia up from school early, and took her to the park. They spent the afternoon on the swings, feeding ducks, getting ice cream that dripped down their hands in the May warmth. Mia talked non-stop about everything and nothing, and Daniel listened like his life depended on it. That night, he cooked dinner, real dinner, with vegetables and everything. They ate together, then watched a movie Mia picked, some animated thing about talking animals, and Daniel didn't check his phone once. Before bed, Mia hugged him extra tight. I like this version of you better. Me too, Bug. Me too. Monday brought its own chaos, but Daniel approached it differently. He let Marcus handle the Chicago orientation while he focused on setting up the editorial frameworks for all 3 satellite offices. He delegated hiring coordination to Sarah, who was better at evaluating talent anyway. He stopped trying to attend every meeting and started trusting his team to make decisions without him. It felt wrong at first, like abandoning ship, but slowly things started working better instead of worse. The satellite offices launched in June. Chicago hit the ground running with a local investigation into police department misconduct. Atlanta started a series on healthcare access in rural communities. LA focused on environmental justice and water rights. The work was good, sometimes great, and Daniel hadn't micromanaged any of it. The Friday meetings with Aurora evolved. Less reporting, more strategizing. She pushed him on vision, on where they should go next, on what they were building beyond just successful journalism. What's the end game? She asked one morning in late June. We've proven the model works. We're scaling successfully. What happens when we've transformed the entire news division? Daniel thought about it. We keep doing work that matters. Keep telling stories that connect. That's not an end game. That's a philosophy. Maybe the philosophy is the point. Aurora tilted her head, considering. You've changed since that first meeting. You used to have all the answers planned out. Now you're comfortable with ambiguity. Is that good or bad? It's honest. She stood walking to the window. Most people in your position would be angling for the next promotion by now, positioning themselves for VP roles, playing politics. You're not doing any of that. Should I be? I don't know. Should you? She turned to face him. What do you actually want, Daniel? Not what you think you should want. What keeps you up at night beyond the work? The question was unexpected, too personal for their usual dynamic. Daniel almost deflected, but something about the way she was looking at him made him answer truthfully. I want to build something that lasts, that Mia can look back on and be proud of. I want to stop feeling like I'm one mistake away from losing everything. He paused. And I want to stop feeling like I have to choose between being a good father and being good at my job. Aurora's expression softened in a way he'd never seen before. Those aren't mutually exclusive. They feel like it sometimes. Because you're trying to be perfect at both. You can't be. Nobody can. She walked back to the desk, closer than their usual careful distance. You're a better father than you think, and a better strategist than you give yourself credit for. Stop measuring yourself against impossible standards. Even yours? She smiled, small but genuine. Especially mine. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither of them was naming. Daniel became acutely aware of how close she was standing, the way she was looking at him like she was seeing something beyond the professional role he played. His phone buzzed, shattering the moment. A text from Mia's school about an emergency contact update. Daniel pulled back, the spell broken. I should go, he said. School thing. Of course. Aurora's expression was unreadable again, the vulnerability tucked away. See you next week. Daniel left feeling unsteady, like the ground beneath him had shifted without warning. July brought a heat wave that turned New York into a furnace. The lab's success continued, stories breaking through, audiences growing, impact compounding. But Daniel noticed cracks forming. Chicago's team lead quit unexpectedly, citing burnout. Atlanta missed 2 deadlines in a row because of staffing shortages. LA's investigation hit legal roadblocks that threatened to kill the entire project. The model worked, but it wasn't scaling as smoothly as the board wanted to believe. Daniel spent more time putting out fires than building new things. He flew to Chicago twice in 1 week, to Atlanta the week after. The travel meant less time with Mia, more guilt, more of the exhaustion that had become baseline. During one particularly brutal week, everything came to a head. Atlanta's team published a piece without proper legal review. It was good journalism, but it named sources who hadn't been properly vetted, and within hours, Meridian was facing a defamation lawsuit. Aurora called an emergency meeting. Not just Daniel and the legal team, but the full executive committee. The conference room was packed, the energy hostile. How did this happen? Stephen Park demanded. We have protocols, multiple checkpoints. How does something this sloppy get through? Daniel felt every eye on him. The Atlanta team was working under a tight deadline. They thought legal had approved. They thought? They didn't confirm? Stephen's voice was sharp. This is exactly what I warned about. We scaled too fast, cut too many corners, and now we're exposed. One mistake doesn't mean the entire model is broken. It means the oversight is broken, which means leadership is broken. Stephen looked at Aurora. With respect, this falls on whoever's responsible for quality control across all offices, which is Daniel. The room went silent. Daniel felt his face flush hot, anger and humiliation mixing toxic. Aurora's expression was glacial. Stephen, if you have concerns about leadership effectiveness, we can discuss them privately. Right now, we're focused on containment and correction. I'm focused on accountability. If this were any other division head, we'd be talking about consequences. Then it's lucky we're not any other division. Aurora's voice could have cut glass. Daniel built something that transformed this company's reputation and revenue. One legal misstep doesn't erase that. Now, are you interested in solving the problem or just assigning blame? Stephen backed down, but barely. The meeting devolved into damage control planning, legal strategy, PR response, process improvements. Daniel contributed where he could, but mostly he sat there feeling like a target. Afterward, Aurora pulled him aside. Don't, she said before he could speak. Don't what? Spiral into self-flagellation. Stephen's been looking for an excuse to undermine you since the expansion. This gave him ammunition, but it's not fatal. It's my responsibility. I should have caught it. You can't catch everything. That's the point of distributed leadership. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You're not failing, Daniel. You're learning what it means to operate at scale. There's a difference. Tell that to the board. I will. I already am. Her eyes held his. I've got your back on this. Trust me. The words hit harder than they should have. Daniel nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The lawsuit settled 3 weeks later for less than expected, with Meridian issuing a correction and implementing new editorial oversight protocols. The Atlanta team lead was reassigned, not fired, and Daniel personally overhauled the review process for all satellite offices. But the damage to his confidence lingered. He second-guessed decisions, over-reviewed work, inserted himself back into details he'd learned to delegate. The team noticed. Marcus called him on it. "You're backsliding," Marcus said bluntly during a one-on-one. "Micromanaging again, treating everyone like they're about to screw up." "I'm being thorough." "You're being paranoid, and it's killing morale." Daniel rubbed his face. "I don't know how to do this, Marcus. How to lead at this scale without either abandoning oversight or suffocating people." "You figure it out by making mistakes and adjusting, same as anything else." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Look, you built something incredible, but you're so afraid of it falling apart that you're strangling it. At some point, you have to trust that the foundation is strong enough to hold. What if it's not? Then we fix it, but you won't know until you let go enough to test it." Daniel knew Marcus was right. Knowing didn't make it easier. The breakthrough came unexpectedly during a Wednesday afternoon when Daniel was reviewing Chicago's latest investigation for the third time, catching details that didn't need catching. Aurora appeared at his desk. "Come with me. I'm in the middle of—" "Now, Daniel." He followed her to the elevator, up to the 42nd floor, down a hallway he'd never been in before. She unlocked a door to a small office with windows overlooking the city. "Sit," she said. Daniel sat. Aurora took the chair across from him, not behind a desk, but facing him directly. "Tell me what you're afraid of." "I'm not—" "Don't lie. We're past that." Her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. "What are you actually afraid of?" The question punctured something. Daniel looked out at the city, at the buildings stretching toward a cloudless sky, and found himself answering. "That I'm not good enough. That I got lucky with a few projects and now I'm in over my head. That everyone's going to realize I don't actually know what I'm doing and everything will collapse." He paused. "That I'm going to fail Mia the way I failed at my marriage. That she'll grow up and realize I was just pretending to have my life together." Aurora was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I fired Mitchell Gow because he was competent and careful and completely mediocre. I hired you because you were willing to take risks that terrified you. Do you know why that mattered?" "Because you needed someone reckless? Because I needed someone who understood that anything worth building requires stepping into uncertainty. Mitchell wanted guarantees. You wanted impact." She leaned forward. "You're not failing, Daniel. You're doing something genuinely difficult, and you're doing it while raising a daughter alone and maintaining standards that most people wouldn't bother with. That's not failure. That's courage." "Doesn't feel like courage?" It never does from the inside. Courage feels like terror you're pushing through anyway. Daniel met her eyes. "Is that what you did? Building this company?" "Every single day. Still do." She smiled, sad and knowing. "The fear doesn't go away. You just get better at working despite it." They sat in silence, the city humming below them. Daniel felt something shift, not resolution exactly, but a loosening of the grip fear had on his chest. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "Seeing me clearly enough to know what I needed to hear." Aurora's expression changed, something flickering across her face that looked almost like longing. "Daniel?" The door opened. Rebecca appeared, looking apologetic. "Sorry to interrupt, but the board call starts in 5 minutes." The moment shattered. Aurora stood smoothly, professional mask sliding back into place. "Right. Thank you, Rebecca." She left without looking back, and Daniel sat alone in the empty office, wondering what she'd been about to say and whether he actually wanted to know. That night, he took Mia to dinners at her favorite restaurant, the diner on the corner that served pancakes for dinner and had a jukebox she loved feeding quarters into. They ate and talked and laughed, and Daniel felt present in a way he hadn't in months. "You seem happier," Mia observed, stealing a piece of his bacon. "I am." "Because of work?" "Because I stopped trying to control everything." He smiled. "Turns out the world doesn't fall apart when you let other people help carry it. I could have told you that." "You're smarter than me, Bug." "I know." She grinned, gap-toothed and confident, and Daniel thought about Aurora's words. Courage feels like terror you're pushing through anyway. Maybe he was doing better than he thought. Maybe being enough didn't require being perfect. The realization felt like breathing after holding his breath for months. August arrived with thunderstorms that shook the windows and left the city smelling like wet concrete and possibility. Daniel had started leaving work at 6, sometimes earlier, prioritizing dinner with Mia over emails that could wait until morning. The lab continued producing strong work across all 4 offices, and he'd learned to trust his team leads to handle most decisions without him hovering. It felt strange, having space to breathe, like he'd been running so fast for so long that slowing down made him notice injuries he'd been ignoring. The Friday meetings with Aurora had become something different over the summer. Less performative, more collaborative. They still argued, but the arguments felt less like combat and more like 2 people genuinely trying to solve problems together. She'd started asking his opinion on things beyond the lab, company strategy, board dynamics, decisions that had nothing to do with his job description. "Why are you asking me?" Daniel said one morning when she wanted his take on a potential acquisition. "Because you think differently than everyone else in this building. That's valuable." "Huh? Or you're just tired of hearing the same opinions recycled." "That too." She smiled, and Daniel noticed how much more often she smiled lately. Small moments where the armor came down and he glimpsed the person underneath the CEO persona. It made him nervous in ways he didn't want to examine too closely. The moment everything shifted came on a Tuesday in mid-August, completely without warning. Daniel was reviewing budgets when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, then answered out of habit. "Is this Daniel Brooks?" A woman's voice, unfamiliar. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Jennifer Hartley. I'm calling from Portland General Hospital. We have your ex-wife, Jennifer Brooks, in our ER. You're still listed as her emergency contact." The world tilted. What happened? "She was in a car accident. Non-life-threatening injuries, but she's asking to speak with you. Is there any way you could come to Portland?" Daniel's mind raced. Jenny. He hadn't heard from her in 3 years. Not since the divorce finalized and she'd disappeared into her new life. "I'm in New York. I can't just..." "She's asking about your daughter. Says she needs to talk to you about Mia." Ice flooded his veins. "What about Mia?" "She wouldn't tell me, but she's insistent. Says it's urgent." Daniel ended the call feeling like he'd been punched. He sat there for 10 minutes, staring at nothing, before his brain kicked back into gear. He booked a flight leaving that night, arranged for Mrs. Chen to stay with Mia, and was halfway to the door when he realized he should probably tell someone at work. He found Aurora in her office, on a call with someone in London. She saw his face and ended the conversation immediately. "What's wrong?" "Son." Daniel explained, the words coming out mechanical. "I need to go to Portland, tonight. I don't know how long I'll be gone." Aurora stood. "Do you need anything? Company assistance? Legal support? I don't know what I need. I don't even know what this is about." His hands were shaking. She left. 3 years ago, she walked away without looking back. And now she's in a hospital asking about Mia, and Aurora crossed the room, took his hands in hers. The contact was shocking, grounding. "Breathe. You're spiraling." Daniel breathed. "Good. Now listen, you go to Portland, you find out what she wants, you handle it. Whatever you need from me, time off, resources, anything, you have it. Clear?" "Clear." She squeezed his hands once, then let go. "And Daniel? Mia's your daughter. Legally, emotionally, in every way that matters. Don't let Jenny convince you otherwise." The reassurance steadied him. "Thank you. Text me when you land. I want to know you got there safely." Daniel made it home with enough time to pack and explained to Mia that he had to take a quick trip for work. She accepted it with the resilience she'd developed over years of adapting to his unpredictable schedule, but her hug lasted longer than usual. "Come back soon," she said against his shoulder. "Always, Bug, always." The flight to Portland was turbulent, both literally and in Daniel's head. He kept replaying the limited information he had, trying to construct scenarios that made sense. Jenny wanted to talk about Mia. That could mean anything. Money, custody, some illness he didn't know about. By the time he landed at midnight Pacific time, he'd imagined every worst-case scenario and several that were probably impossible. Portland General was a maze of fluorescent hallways and exhausted staff. Daniel found Jenny's room on the third floor, paused outside the door, and had to physically force himself to knock. "Come in." She looked smaller than he remembered, thinner, older, with bruises darkening her left cheek and arm in a sling. Her hair was shorter, dyed a color that didn't quite work. She looked up when he entered, and something complicated passed across her face. "Daniel, you came. You said it was about Mia." He stayed near the door, not sitting. "What's going on?" Jenny's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sick. Stage 3 breast cancer. They caught it 4 months ago." Information landed heavy. Daniel felt a flash of sympathy immediately complicated by anger. "I'm sorry, that's terrible. But what does that have to do with Mia?" "I've been doing chemo. It's not working well. My doctors are talking about more aggressive treatment, possible hospice if things don't improve." She wiped her eyes. "River left me, said he couldn't handle it. I'm alone, Daniel, and I started thinking about all the choices I made, all the things I walked away from. Jenny, I want to see her before it's too late. I want to see my daughter." The words hit like a physical blow. Daniel's entire body went rigid. "Your daughter? You left her. You signed away custody. You haven't called once in 3 years. I know. No, I messed up. But she's still mine biologically, and I'm running out of time to make it right. You don't get to do this. You don't get to disappear for 3 years and then show up dying and demand access because you're suddenly feeling sentimental." "I'm not demanding. I'm asking. Please, Daniel. I just want to see her once, talk to her, explain." "Explain what? That you chose a man over her? That you decided being a mother was too hard, so you just quit?" Daniel's voice was rising. "She's 7 years old. She's built a life that doesn't include you because you didn't want to be included. You don't get to disrupt that because you're scared of dying alone." Jenny flinched like he'd hit her. "I deserve that. All of it. But Daniel, she deserves to know I'm sorry. That I loved her even if I was too broken to show it. She deserves a mother who didn't abandon her. Since you can't give her that, the next best thing is not confusing her with a deathbed apology that serves you more than it serves her." The silence that followed was thick with years of resentment and hurt. Jenny looked at him with something like recognition. "You hate me." "I don't hate you. I pity you. You had something beautiful, and you threw it away because it was hard. And now you want me to let you back in so you can feel better about your choices before you die. That's selfish, Jenny. That's everything you always were." She sobbed then, broken and ugly, and Daniel felt no satisfaction in it, just exhaustion. He left the room, found a waiting area, and called Aurora. It was 4 in the morning New York time, but she answered on the second ring. "Daniel?" Hearing her voice cracked something open. "She wants to see Mia, my ex-wife. She's dying and she wants to apologize or reconnect or something, and I told her no, and I don't know if that makes me protective or cruel." "Tell me what happened." He did, the whole story spilling out. Aurora listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "What does Mia know about her mother?" "Just that she left, that sometimes people aren't ready to be parents. I've tried to keep it neutral, not poison her against Jenny. And if Jenny dies without Mia seeing her, will Mia resent you for making that choice?" The question cut through Daniel's anger to the heart of the matter. "I don't know. Maybe. Probably." "Then you have to tell Mia the truth and let her decide. She's young, but she's not stupid. She understands more than you think." "What if it hurts her?" "It will hurt her, but letting her mother die without giving her the choice might hurt her more later." Aurora's voice was gentle. "You're trying to protect her. That's what good parents do. But sometimes protection means letting them face hard things with your support instead of shielding them from everything painful." Daniel pressed his palm against his eyes. Daniel pressed. "When did you get so wise about parenting?" "I'm not. I'm just good at seeing what people can't see in themselves." She paused. "Come home. Talk to Mia. Whatever she decides, you'll handle it together." "Okay." "And Daniel, you're a good father. Don't let Jenny's failure make you doubt that." What? He caught the next flight back to New York, arriving home late Wednesday morning. Mia was at school. Daniel picked her up early, took her to the park, and sat her down on their usual bench. Bug, I need to talk to you about something important, about your mom. Mia's expression went carefully neutral, the way it always did when Jenny came up. Okay? Daniel explained it as gently as he could, that Jenny was sick, that she wanted to see Mia, that Mia didn't have to say yes but deserved to know the option existed. When he finished, Mia was quiet for a long time, swinging her legs and watching ducks drift across the pond. Finally, she said, "Why did she leave?" Because she wasn't ready to be a mom. Sometimes people make mistakes they can't fix. Is she going to die? Maybe. The doctors aren't sure. If I don't see her and she dies, will I be sad? The question was so direct, so heartbreakingly mature. I don't know, sweetheart. How do you feel about it? Mia thought about it with the seriousness she brought to everything. I think I'm already sad, because she left and that hurt. But if she's dying and wants to see me, maybe it would be sadder if I said no and always wondered. So you want to go? I want you to come with me. I don't want to do it alone. Daniel pulled her into his lap, holding her tight. Always, Bug. I'm always with you. They flew to Portland the following Monday. Daniel had coordinated with Jenny's doctors to make sure she was stable enough for visitors. Marcus had volunteered to cover the lab responsibilities. Aurora had insisted on paying for the flights and hotel, refusing to hear arguments. Jenny was out of the hospital, staying with a friend in a small house in northeast Portland. When they arrived, she answered the door looking fragile and terrified. Her eyes went straight to Mia, filling with tears. Hi, baby. Mia stood very still, holding Daniel's hand. Hi. They sat in the living room, awkward and painful. Jenny tried to explain, to apologize, to make sense of choices that didn't make sense. Mia listened with a composure that broke Daniel's heart. I didn't leave because of you, Jenny said, voice shaking. I left because I was broken, because I didn't know how to be what you needed. Mom bati omoshom. You could have learned, Mia said quietly. Daddy didn't know how to do everything either, but he tried. Jenny looked at Daniel, something like gratitude and regret mixing in her expression. Your dad's a good man. Better than I deserved. He's the best, Mia agreed. Then, surprising everyone, she stood and walked over to Jenny. I forgive you, not because what you did was okay, but because holding on to being mad just makes me tired. I get it. Jenny pulled Mia into a hug, sobbing. Mia led her, patient and kind in ways she shouldn't have to be. They stayed for 2 hours. Jenny told stories about when Mia was a baby, shared photos Daniel had never seen. It wasn't healing exactly, but it was closure. A door being gently closed instead of slammed. When they left, Mia was quiet on the drive back to the hotel. Daniel gave her space, not pushing. Finally, she said, I'm glad we came, but I'm glad we're leaving too. That makes sense. Daddy? Yeah, Bug? You're my real parent, not her. You. Daniel had to pull over because his eyes were too blurred to drive safely. He turned in his seat, taking Mia's face in his hands. You're the best thing I ever did. The only thing I'm absolutely sure I got right. Even when I'm annoying? Especially then. She smiled, and Daniel thought about Aurora's words. Courage feels like terror you're pushing through anyway. Letting Mia see Jenny had been terrifying, but it had also been right. They flew home Tuesday evening. Wednesday morning, Daniel returned to work feeling hollowed out, but somehow lighter. Aurora met him in the hallway before he made it to his desk. How did it go? Hard, necessary. Mia's tougher than I give her credit for. She gets that from you, but she gets it from surviving things she shouldn't have had to survive. Aurora studied him with that look she got when she was seeing past his defenses. Are you okay? Getting there, he paused. Thank you for the advice, for the support, for not making me feel weak for falling apart. Daniel, you held your daughter through one of the hardest experiences of her life. That's not falling apart. That's holding the center while everything else breaks around you. Something in her voice made Daniel look closer, Aurora's expression was softer than professional, her eyes holding his with an intensity that had nothing to do with work. "Aurora, we should talk," she said. "Not here, not now, but soon." "About what?" "About everything we've been carefully not talking about for months." Daniel's heart kicked hard against his ribs. "Okay. Okay." She nodded, something like relief crossing her face. "Friday, after the team meeting, my office, sits." She walked away before he could respond, leaving Daniel standing there, wondering if he'd just imagined the entire conversation. The next 2 days dragged and flew simultaneously. Daniel went through the motions at work, had dinner with Mia, helped with homework, maintained routines. But part of his brain stayed fixed on Friday, on Aurora's words, on the possibility of something he'd been refusing to acknowledge. Friday morning arrived cold and clear, one of those late August days that felt like autumn practicing its entrance. The team meeting ran long, discussions about upcoming investigations and budget allocations. Daniel contributed when asked, but mostly just waited for it to end. Finally, people filtered out. Marcus gave him a knowing look on the way past that Daniel pretended not to see. He walked to Aurora's office, knocked, entered when she called. She was standing at the window, looking out at the city in the early evening light. She didn't turn when he closed the door. "I've been trying to figure out how to say this professionally," she said. "Turns out there's no professional way to tell someone that you've developed feelings you have no business having." Daniel's breath caught. "Aurora." "Let me finish, please." She turned to face him. "You challenged me from the first meeting, refused to bend, refused to play it safe, refused to let me steamroll you the way I do everyone else. And somewhere in the past year, that went from professionally interesting to personally terrifying. Terrifying. I don't do this, Daniel. I don't let people in. I don't blur professional lines. I built this company by maintaining absolute control over every aspect of my life. And then you showed up with your impossible integrity and your daughter who teaches you about bravery and your refusal to accept mediocrity from yourself or anyone else. And you made me want things I'd convinced myself I didn't need." Daniel crossed the room, stopping a few feet away, close but not touching. "What things?" "Connection, partnership, someone who sees the person behind the company and doesn't run away." She met his eyes. "I'm not good at this, at being vulnerable, at admitting I'm lonely, but I am. And you're the first person in years who's made that loneliness feel like something worth fixing." The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Daniel thought about all the moments that had led here, the arguments, the late meetings, the quiet conversations that went deeper than work, the way she'd held his hands before Portland, the way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention. "I have a daughter," he said quietly. "My life is complicated. I can't do casual, and I can't put her through meeting someone who might not stay." "I know. And we work together. The power dynamic is problematic. I know that too." Aurora stepped closer. "I'm not asking you to have all the answers right now. I'm just asking if you feel this too. Because if it's just me, I'll handle it. But if it's both of us, then we figure out how to navigate it together." Daniel thought about Mia asking if he liked his boss, about the different face he made when talking about Aurora. Thought about Marcus's warning that he was either getting promoted or fired, about how those had started to feel like the same thing. "It's both of us," he said. "Has been for a while. I just didn't know what to do about it." Aurora smiled, genuine and a little scared. "Neither did I." They stood there in the fading light, the city humming below them, neither quite ready to close the distance, but both acknowledging it existed. "This is going to be complicated," Daniel said. "Everything worth having is. And we need to be smart about it, transparent with HR, clear boundaries between professional and personal. So, we will be. I'm not risking what we've built professionally for something we haven't defined personally." She paused. "But I'd like the chance to try, slowly, carefully, with Mia's well-being as the absolute priority." She asked me if I liked you, told me I made a confused and mad at the same time face when I talked about you. Aurora laughed, surprised and delighted. That's accurate. She said I should ask if you like me back. Your daughter is very wise. She gets it from surviving things she shouldn't have to survive. Daniel echoed his earlier words, then added, So what now? Now you go home to her. We take this slow. Maybe coffee next week. A conversation that isn't about work. See if what we have in conference rooms translates to real life. And if it doesn't, then we stay professional colleagues who respect each other. But Daniel? She reached out, fingertips barely brushing his hand. I think it will, Ki-young. The touch was electric, promise and possibility wrapped in the simplest contact. Daniel turned his hand, letting their fingers intertwine for just a moment before stepping back. Coffee next week, and he agreed. Somewhere Mia would approve of. Does she approve of me? She thinks you're brilliant and terrifying. Basically the same thing I think. I'll take it. Seated. Daniel left before the moment could become something they weren't ready for, riding the elevator down with a stupid smile he couldn't suppress. That weekend, he told Mia he might start seeing someone. She asked if it was his boss. He asked how she knew. She said she'd known for months. Adults were terrible at hiding things. Are you okay with it? Daniel asked. Mia considered seriously. Is she nice to you? Sometimes, when she's not being impossible. Do you like the impossible parts? The question was so insightful it made Daniel laugh. Yeah, Bug, I kind of do. Then it's okay. But I want to meet her for real, not just work stuff. When we're ready, I promise. Coffee the next week turned into dinner the week after. Slow conversations about everything except work. Aurora's childhood in Chicago, Daniel's failed attempts at learning guitar, their shared appreciation for terrible action movies. She was different outside the office, less guarded, more willing to laugh at herself. 2 months later, they took Mia to the planetarium. Aurora asked questions about Jupiter's moons with genuine interest, and Mia showed her the constellations she'd memorized. Watching them together, Daniel felt something settle in his chest that he hadn't known was unsettled. On the subway home, Mia fell asleep between them. Aurora looked at Daniel over her head, and the expression on her face was so open, so vulnerable, that Daniel had to look away before he said something too big for public transportation. The lab continued thriving. The satellite offices found their rhythms. Daniel learned to lead without controlling, to trust without abandoning responsibility. He got promoted to VP of Innovation in December, a title that came with Aurora's recommendation and the board's unanimous approval. The night they celebrated, just the two of them in her apartment after Mia was asleep at home with Mrs. Chen, Aurora told him she loved him. Said it simple and direct, the way she said everything important. Daniel said it back, meaning every syllable. This is going to be complicated, she warned, echoing his words from months ago. Everything worth having is, he replied, echoing hers. They figured it out together. Transparent with HR, maintaining professional boundaries at work, building something personal that existed separately from their careers. It wasn't perfect. They still argued, still challenged each other, still drove each other crazy in ways both frustrating and necessary. But it was real. Built on mutual respect, hard-won trust, and the understanding that the best partnerships weren't about perfection. They were about two imperfect people choosing each other anyway. By the following spring, Aurora had started joining them for Saturday morning pancakes, helping Mia with science projects, attending school events Daniel couldn't make because of work. She was careful, respectful of boundaries, never trying to replace Jenny, but carving out her own space in their lives. One April evening, after Mia had gone to bed, Daniel and Aurora sat on his apartment's fire escape watching the city lights. I never thought I'd have this, Aurora said quietly. A family. People who want me around not for what I can do for them, but just because. You thought you had to choose between building an empire and building a life. Most people do choose, or they fail at both trying to have everything. Maybe the trick is redefining what everything means. Daniel took her hand. You taught me that success isn't just professional achievement. Sometimes it's knowing when to leave work at 6, when to trust people, when to let yourself be human instead of invincible. And you taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness, that letting people in doesn't mean losing control, That the most important thing you build isn't a company, it's connection. She leaned her head on his shoulder. We're a good team. The best. Inside, through the window, they could see Mia's room. The glow-in-the-dark stars on her ceiling, the books stacked beside her bed, the life they'd built together through trial and error and stubborn refusal to give up. Daniel thought about that first morning, alarm screaming at 5:30, feeling like he was barely surviving. Thought about standing in Aurora's conference room, terrified and defiant, refusing to back down even when it would have been easier. Courage feels like terror you're pushing through anyway. He'd pushed through, they both had. And on the other side was this. Imperfect, complicated, beautiful in ways he'd stopped believing possible. Daddy? Mia's voice called from inside. I can't sleep. Aurora smiled. I'll make tea. You handle bedtime negotiation. They went inside together, into the messy reality of family and partnership, and lives built not on perfection, but on showing up every day and choosing each other again. Success had built an empire, but love, messy, complicated, hard-won love, had built a home. And standing in his small Brooklyn apartment with his daughter asking for one more story, and the woman he loved making tea in his kitchen, Daniel understood something he'd spent years missing. The empire was impressive. The home was everything. The choice had never been one or the other. It had always been about building both, in balance, with people who made you better than you'd be alone. Mia called again, impatient. Aurora handed him a cup of tea with a knowing smile. Daniel kissed her once, quick and easy, then headed down the hallway where his daughter waited. Outside, the city hummed with millions of other stories, other struggles, other people trying to figure out how to build lives worth living. Inside, in this one small apartment, a family was doing exactly that. Not perfectly, but together. And that made all the difference.